sporting environments and places where women and girls want to be active, are safe, welcoming, inclusive, and accessible at the times in which they can participate. We have a really inspiring lineup of presenters today, including industry experts and local club leaders, to share with us some insights on how sports clubs can engage and retain girls and women in both player and leadership roles. There's already some fantastic work happening in our local clubs, and this is about sharing what everyone's learning from those great things that are happening. I would like to welcome our speakers today, Councillor Georgina Papafario, the Mayor of Brimbank City Council, Karen Pearce, Manager of Growth and Inclusion at Football Victoria, Elise Muller, Essendon VFLW player and also a past Brimbank Sport Club participant, Claire Hannon, who's the chair of the Susan Alberti Women in Sport and is a professor from Victoria University, Josh Wheeler, President of Brimbank Bucks Rugby Union Club, and Amanda Stella, President of Calder United Soccer Club. I'd also like to welcome Kiralee Myers, Active Communities Development Officer at Brimbank City Council, who's been responsible for the organising of today. Now, we're going to be giving some time for questions and answers at the end of each presentation. If you wish to ask a question, please do so by using the Q&A icon on the bottom of your screen, either during the presentation or immediately after. We do have some tight timeframes tonight, so we'll probably just have 2 to 3 questions per presenter. This is also set up as a Zoom webinar, so please be aware that all attendees' videos and microphones are switched off. We will also be recording this webinar and we'll be able to share it in the coming days if you want to review it or you want someone else in your club to be able to watch it. So our first person I'd like to welcome is Brimbank City Council's Mayor, Councillor Georgina Papafario, to welcome you all today. She's a huge champion of women's sport and sport in general, and it's great to have her in the mayoral role at the moment, really advocating for women's sport. Thank you, Councillor Papafario.
Thank you, Lindley. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Sports Development Forum. Today's topic is Girls and Women in Sport and Active Recreation. Firstly, on behalf of Brimbank City Council, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Wurundjeri people, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge some of my fellow councillors that are with us today. Deputy Mayor Councillor Kim Tien Trung, Councillor Sam David, Councillor Bruce Lancashire, Councillor Margaret Goodichere, Councillor Jeanette Aziz, and Councillor Victoria Ball. I also would like to acknowledge and welcome our MC for today, Lindley Dumble, Brimbank's Director for Community Wellbeing. Our first guest speaker, Karen Pearce from Football Victoria, who's also the Manager for Growth and Inclusion. Our second speaker, Elise Muller from Essendon VFLW. Our third speaker, Claire Hannon, who is a Victoria University researcher and is also the chairperson for the Susan Alberti Women in Sport. And our 2 panellists for today, Josh Wheeler from Brimbank Bucks and also the wonderful Amanda Stella from the Calder United Soccer Club. Sport is part of the way of life in Melbourne's West, especially Brimbank. Being home to some of Australia's best sporting stars, athletes and clubs, our community is rich in sporting history. But whilst it is important to reflect, it is also more important to plan and prepare for our sporting future. Today's forum provides an opportunity for council, sport industry experts and local club representatives to engage, discuss and collaborate around engaging more girls and women into sport and recreation. Whilst council acknowledges the difficult and unprecedented circumstances being experienced by clubs during the COVID shutdown period, We also remain committed to doing everything we can to support and help prepare for the recovery. Brimbank's whole of council COVID-19 recovery strategy contains a dedicated sport and recreation response, which has been helping guide our on-the-ground engagement and assistance for local clubs. However, working together to help grow female participation in sport will be more important than ever before, particularly as a part of the COVID recovery efforts start. Whilst local female participation was on the rise prior to COVID, placing more demand on local facilities, Brimbank was also experiencing a number of challenges around health, well-being and female sport participation. A recent study found that women and girls in the Western region of Melbourne are more diverse culturally, ethnically and also economically, are also underrepresented in sport and recreation more than across all the other regions in Melbourne, experience high commute times resulting in reduced time for active leisure and have more parent and carer duties on average than Greater Melbourne. Excuse me, my voice is going. Research shows us the biggest barriers faced by females in the Western region of Melbourne. These barriers include, firstly, time. Women of all ages consistently identified lack of time as a critical barrier impeding their participation in physical activity. The second barrier being support. Lack of support, typically in the form of family or friends. This means emotionally or psychologically not supporting the activity or sports enough. The third barrier, self-efficacy, belief that one can successfully perform an activity. What we mean by this is low level of confidence and self-belief can discourage women from participating in activity programs. Female participation rates in sport also declined steeply after the teenage years. However, irrespective of age, males continue to participate in sport at double the rate of females for those aged from 5 to over 65 years of age. Without adequate planning and coordination, we risk compounding these issues as a result of COVID. The question that has been asked to Brimbank is, what are our female sports strategies and outcomes? Well, Council has been working proactively to help address these issues through various initiatives. These include the adoption of the Women's Participation in Sport and Active Recreation in Melbourne's West Action Plan for Change. The second initiative is Brimbank's Sport Facility Development Plan, which provides a rolling pipeline of works to improve female-friendly facilities. Thirdly, Brimbank's Physical Active Strategy and Be Active Brimbank initiatives, enabling more women to access physical activity opportunities. The fourth one, the Brimbank Female Football Festival, which sadly this year was cancelled due to COVID. And the fifth initiative, Brimbank's COVID-19 Sport and Recreation Response. And I believe most of these documents are available online if you would like to view these. Council's advocacy has also helped secure some key outcomes in recent times through the Transforming Brimbank 2020 Sport and Recreation Agenda. These include meeting with parliamentarians, including meeting with the Ministry for Community Sport, the Minister for Community Sport, Ross Spence, to convey local sporting club priorities and issues in response to COVID. The second outcome, Brimbank being shortlisted to become a possible home of the Matildas at Sydenham Park. The third outcome, securing over $8.5 million in state government funding for key local sport and active recreation infrastructure projects, much of which will support more women and girls sporting facilities. The fourth outcome, advocating for state government support for local sporting codes, leagues and clubs, including the $1,000 support payments to clubs that was recently available, and I hope all clubs applied for. The fifth outcome being the securing strategic partnerships, including an MOU with Victoria University to help engage and advance local sport outcomes. However, as we work our way out of COVID, a lot more will need to be done. As a starting point, Council has developed a new 19-point advocacy plan for COVID recovery, which contains health, wellbeing, female sport and recreation outcomes as key pillars. Whilst Council will continue leading, coordinating and advocating on behalf of local sporting community needs in response to COVID, we cannot do this alone. That is why we have arranged today by bringing together sport industry experts, community sport leaders, clubs, groups and members. Council intends to foster further collaboration, cooperation and support for local girls and women in sport outcomes as part of the COVID-19 recovery phase. As most of you here would know, I am a huge advocate for sport and recreation, in particular increasing participation of females in sport and advocating for females to have equal access to sporting facilities. Thank you again for being here today. I look forward to joining you in hearing from our guest speakers, panel members, and of course all of you from our local clubs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Papafario, for that great introduction. I would now like to introduce our first presenter, Karen Pearce. Karen spent 19 years at Basketball Victoria and has spent the past year as the Growth and Inclusion Manager at Football Victoria. Her passion, drive and commitment around inclusion and diversity within sport is commendable. Karen will discuss the barriers females face to joining sports clubs, how clubs can engage and retain females in sport, and the benefits of having social sport in addition to competition. Karen's also a wonderful leader in her own right, and we were really lucky at Brimbank Council to have her also speak at our International Women's Day event this year and hear her story and journey as a leader in sport. So thank you, Karen. I'll hand over to you now.
Sorry, changed my screen share and then couldn't get myself off mute. So I found the button. So I hope you can all see that. I will start, though. I also want to acknowledge the traditional owners of every land that we are all gathered on today, and pay my respects to all the elders, past, present and emerging. I also want to acknowledge my great-great-grandmother, Janet Sprake, who we believe is a Yorta woman, but it's part of our ancestry that we only found out about 5 years ago. So there's a lot of history going on in the background on that one, but I did want to take that moment to acknowledge her. I also want to congratulate Amanda Stella for becoming president at Calder as well before we go, and to thank the Mayor and the councillors and Brimbank City Council for having me here today. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey. A lot of people, because women and girls in sport is often mentioned about, we forget how long it's been going on in our living world. So I want to take you through a little bit of that and then share some of my women and girls strategy with you as well, to give you hopefully some ideas of what to do. So historically, we know that women have fought hard to advance women's rights, including the right to vote and the right to work. And much of this profile was attributed to the suffragettes. This was called the first wave of feminism. And then there became what they called a second wave, which was the 1960s, 1980s, which was all about equality and sexual expression. So the burning of the bras and all of those sort of things that went back in the day of, you know, sex and rock and roll and, you know, free world, all of that. 1990s brought in the third wave, which was a desire for empowerment. And then around about 2012 was the fourth wave, which was the fight to end the overall marginalisation of women. Now, the current boom in women's sport is highlighting these historical issues and creating much needed conversation. But the reality is, as I just said, this has been occurring for many, many years. So very early on, it was believed that the Olympics originated as the ancient game for men only. Women weren't allowed in the stadium at the time, but sometime around 776 BC, there was a separate foot race that was held for young virgin women or young girls, virgin girls, dedicated to the goddess Hera, which is the middle statue right there. It was 1/6 shorter than the men's equivalent race. The men didn't attend, as the women didn't attend the men's race. So here we started to see there was a difference between men and boys sport and women and girls sport. It was segregated. It wasn't joined together way back in those days. So over the years, there's been many, many inquiries into women and girls in sport and active recreation. And there's been many policies that have been put together on that. 1945 was the Charter of the United Nations. There was a convention in 1979 on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. The Ottawa Charter was put together in 1986. In Australia, it emerged as an issue following the tabling of a report in 1985 that was called Women's Sport and the Media. This created a national policy plan in 1987 that sat there for approximately 10 years until it was reviewed in 1997. The first international inquiry that happened was called the Brighton Declaration in the UK, which is in 1994. And they put together a set of principles that they said that if it was supported by appropriate policy structures and mechanisms, it would provide more opportunity and reduce the barriers to participation for women and girls in sport. The Brighton Declaration principles, if you have a look at those, you will see that out of these, this came about out of the barriers that the women and girls were confronted with. And you can see that most of those are still prevalent today, unfortunately. So equality and equity, facilities, school and junior sport, participation in high performance, the good old leadership, education, training and development, sports information and research, resources and domestic and international cooperation. Alarmingly for us, around about 2006, the national government decided to put a Senate inquiry together, and it was titled About Time. What that did again was we were seeing the same barriers that were coming forward for women and girls in sport. But the AOC at the time was documented as saying women leaders are often described as lightweight and seen in a less favourable light, with an expectation to meet higher standards of performance than their male counterparts. I doubt they would say that today. I'm sure we would be horrified if we thought anybody did, but we know that can happen, which is why there is a barrier towards leadership for women in all areas of life. So the issues and the barriers limit choice, confidence, growth, all of those things the Mayor just spoke about before in the Brimbank City Council and all over the world, which is why we must remove them and actually take some time to do something about it. I look at all of this journey of this time on all of it and say that no wonder we've had these barriers presented to us for so long in our lifetime and way before then. The good thing was that the inquiry into women and girls in sport and active recreation in 2014 that was chaired by Peggy O'Neill, that I'm sure you all have heard about, finally saw some action. Because I believe over all these years of looking at the barriers that came up time and time and time again and rarely digressed from one to the other, there wasn't much action. So there was little bits of chipping away at the side and trying to make change, but nothing really happened until this inquiry was put together. Now, they developed a set of 9 recommendations and actions, and the best thing that ever happened was they created the Office for Women, chaired by Dr. Bridie O'Donnell, and now being chaired by Rebecca Lacey as an interim measure. I've been lucky enough to work with Beck at Basketball Victoria for many years. So we're actually starting to see actions coming out of those inquiries, which is really, really pleasing to see. So one of the first things, when I was put on at Football Victoria, which was in June last year, I came on as the Executive Manager of Women and Girls. So the first thing that I needed to do was create a Women and Girls strategy. It took me a number of months. I needed to work out the environment of football, in some ways very different to basketball, but in a lot of ways the barriers are the same across all sports. So I have put together a strategy that is called Football Her Way. And what it is all about is celebrating and working with every woman and girl so she can participate in football whichever way she wants to. So we will celebrate the referee that is loving getting out on the pitch to do mini-roos. We will celebrate the committee member who may or may not aspire to become a president. We will celebrate the lady who has been the manager of that canteen for 30 years, and we will nurture young girls who want to come in and participate however they want to, whether that's aspiring to be a Matilda or just loving playing around with their friends on the field. The whole basis of this is, as that says, it's our intention that everybody in football needs to work on this strategy. It's not something that can come out of my department or my team. It's not just Football Victoria. It needs to be owned by our clubs. And that way we will impact our culture, our values, our policies, practice, planning and programs, because we will be all committed to actually achieve this. We know gender inequality and inequity is not a new thing for football, sport or life in general. But we know when positive difference is felt, that's when the ratio actually becomes equitable. We all need to work hard to get there. Football Her Way is all based around currently on the 5 strategic pillars in the Football Victoria Football Way strategic plan. That will change when the new strategic plan comes into effect, and I will, under my strategies and actions, actually change those to fit within a new strategic plan, however that will work. So the first pillar, number 1, is our clubs. And that's changing the dynamic of our clubs to be inclusive, more inclusive within the spirit of diversity. That means applying a gender lens across all of football. It means using evidence-based data that will inform our planning, our programming and our delivery. We need to eradicate disrespectful behaviour in football. It's rife. It's not a welcoming environment for a lot of people, not just women and girls. So we need to create ethical and respectful behaviour at all times. And we need to assist our clubs to become club ready, whatever that might be for those clubs. Number 2 is based around female-friendly facilities and infrastructure. So it will be female-friendly facility guidelines and builds and shared priority access, because often our women and girls aren't prioritised on the pitches. It's the home of the Matildas, which we're hopeful will be announced in the next few weeks. That will be, we've got commitment from federal and state government for that. So that's exciting. We will end up moving our offices out there, and part of FFA's high performance team will also come down there. And we had obviously the amazing news, the 2023 Women's World Cup hosting announcement, which is a significant achievement, and something that unfortunately with the hit of COVID, I feel like we've lost a bit of that excitement, and we need to reinvigorate that, because that is massive, not just for football, but for every sport that we have here. Number 3 is about enjoying our game. That's continuing to grow traditional football, at the same time creating new alternative social solutions for any woman or girl that wants to participate in football in a different way. So that might be Soccer Mums, it might be Go Girls, which is a program for young 12 to 17-year-old girls who don't play football, programs like that. It's increasing the visibility and development of coaches, referees, players and administrators. It's increasing our footprint in schools and making sure that we have strong supportive partnerships. Number 4 is promoting our game. Creating a movement that encourages women and girls to engage with football, which is a distinct women and girls brand strategy, creating a positive cultural shift, enhancing the visibility of women and girls across our whole football landscape, developing a dedicated commercial strategy so we have financial investment that supports our game, and developing a female football strategy within each and every department internally at Football Victoria. So they are responsible for how they will drive this strategy as well. And the 5th one is around our people, which is investing and advancing gender equity. So that's supporting an increase in the percentage of women on boards, club committees, leadership positions, women supporting women networks, and driving the Change Our Game initiatives. We've got a bold vision to reach 50-50 gender equity by 2027. I remember when I first saw that, I went, whoa, how are we going to do that, when I actually saw how low our women and girls numbers were. It is bold, but it is something that will go way beyond 2027. It will be something we have to chip away at, but we will do strategically, we will work hard at it, and we will one day get to there. Whether it's 2027, I'm not too sure, but hopefully we will. It's all around advocacy, and it's not to the detriment of men and boys. We need men and boys to be responsible to assist in creating gender equitable football clubs and environments, because without them, we can't do it alone. We need to bring them along for the journey as well. My concern is that COVID has been extremely disruptive in more ways than one. Victorian sport as a whole has been impacted in no other way. Obviously, there have been, along the way, we may get a sport that has a major disruption, but to be disrupted as a collective group of sport, it's been a bit of doom and gloom. But what we need to look at is there's huge opportunity now. All the years of speaking about all those barriers, which many have done for such a long time, we now need to turn into action. COVID's given us a chance now to change our mindset, to think differently, to not just push forward with what is the usual way of driving our sport in a traditional method, but how do we engage other people? People are going to want to come back to find that place where they belong, the place where they have friends, the place where they feel welcome, and a place where they can just enjoy their health and well-being outcomes. We need to be adaptive, we need to be innovative, and I think it's in each and every one of our hands now to actually make that happen. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. I think they're really important points you made, that even though COVID is obviously an enormous setback for many sports, but also, a temporary sort of setback for women's participation, I think in crisis there's also opportunities, and that was one of the good messages you've left us with, which is great. We've got a couple of, at least one question that's come through. How do clubs overcome low socioeconomic challenges to engaging females? Particularly sort of the cost of participating in sport.
Yeah, and I will say, coming in, football can be a very expensive sport. And being able to now, I think this is part of our opportunity, is to change that. Why do we have to pay exorbitant dollars to participate in sport? yes, there is potential for that to happen during a pathway in a high performance environment, something like that. But why can we not just create opportunity for people to come and belong at a cost-effective, in a cost-effective way? Do we need to be paying for a seasonal competition round? Do we look at our competition structure and break that down? Do we just invite young women or women and girls to come along, and men and boys, to actually just participate when they want? So they come in and they might pay a few dollars to participate in a social program on one night, but they belong. I think that's more important than anything else, that that we enable that opportunity to happen and try to minimise costs where we possibly can.
Great. And just another question. We sort of talked in the beginning around that often, you know, there's a trend at around the age 14 girls dropping out of sport. What's the experience from Football Victoria's perspective? What are those numbers looking like in terms of participation and age difference around girls?
Yeah, it's exactly the same for football. The thing is that because we've been so traditionally focused for so long, what that has presented is a full-size pitch, which not everybody wants to run around on and have a go. So to start to be adaptive and innovative and cut your pitch into 4, or however that might mean, to enable somebody an opportunity to go, yeah, I can do that. I can't run on a big pitch. I can't do that. That's not me. But what can I do in a modified version? But I'm still participating in football. So I think that's an important way that hopefully will create an opportunity for these young girls who aren't engaging in football because they don't see themselves as part of a pathway, but not really given an opportunity to, in not everywhere, but in a lot of cases, to actually participate just socially for the fun of it. I think that will drive our numbers.
Terrific. Okay, thank you so much, Karen, for answering those questions. Just a reminder to everyone, you can use the Q&A function also during this webinar to log your questions that we can ask presenters along the way. So thanks again, Karen. I'd now like to welcome our next speaker, who is Elise Muller. Elise's personal journey of overcoming multiple challenges to play the sport she loves is inspiring. From playing grassroots sport in Brimbank to getting picked up in the Western Bulldogs and the Essendon VFLW teams. Elise will talk about some of the hurdles she overcame and how clubs made her feel welcome and included. Now, I might ask you to stop sharing your screen, Karen, and we can... Terrific, thank you. Welcome, Elise.
Hello. Awesome, I think the green border means I'm on. Hello, everyone. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I am proudly on the autism spectrum. I'm proudly a female, and I'm proudly part of the Wiradjuri and Palawa tribe. And I'm an elite athlete, and I made a point of not putting a female elite athlete because I think all of them individually are powerful for any individual who has it, and none of them mean less. And I'll go on to explain a little more, but definitely women's sport is equally as important as men's sport, and we are elite athletes. This year I'm not playing with the Essendon VFL. Like everyone, our roles have changed a little bit. Being someone on the autism spectrum who is Indigenous, who is a female, and is also part of the LGBTQIA+ community, I've noticed that there are a lot of communities that get it right and get one part right, whether that's the Indigenous part or whether it's females in sport, whether it's the disability going into disability environments, disability-focused environments, in that they get it right in their specialised area. But what probably isn't what we are working towards is being able to have communities and environments where they're simply inclusive. And following on from the previous speaker, I was like, yeah, it's actually a lot simpler than what we think. It really comes down to openness and adaptability and being, I forgot the word, but it was a bit creative with your approach. So I've found some great inclusive environments in my times, and I've also felt the detriments of exclusion. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys the journey, my journey with you today. I thought it would be a good place to start. I remember the first time I ever felt connected to the world, and especially as a young kid, lots of loud sounds, loud noises. I felt very overwhelmed and isolated to the world because it was just too overwhelming. And the first time I ever felt connected was actually in PE class. We were told to bounce a basketball, and I just felt this amazing connection in bouncing the basketball, where I was someone who stimmed, I made noises, I was always told to be quiet, I was very impulsive, and other people thought badly behaved, but I struggled controlling myself, and I felt like the world was a game of Sims where someone else was controlling me, and I didn't understand myself because I was so young to know why I was reacting to so many things. But this was a moment where I was actually creating noise through the basketball and everyone else was doing the same thing, and I wasn't getting told off. So that was a powerful sport moment. I remember the first time as well that I started then connecting to other people, and I was on a bench outside the playground. It was at recess or lunch, and I saw the grade ones chasing a soccer ball, and I saw them, like, wherever the ball went, they went and followed. And I felt instantly that something made sense, and I wanted to be part of it because I could easily understand that. And growing up, especially with someone with autism, I normally didn't understand what was going on, so I wanted to be part of following that ball. Every day after school, whatever I'd seen at recess and lunch, I would go and practice, whether that's throwing the ball up and catching it, imagining I was playing cricket, or turning tables into soccer, into hurdles and jumping over it, playing soccer. Or at this time it was Leighton Hill, and I was saying, come on. I was really into my sport. And I also remember one of the things that inspired me was there was a girl playing with the other guys, and she was in grade 5 or 6. And that was something quite foreign, and it's not too long ago. It was about 15 years ago, but actually that sounds old now, but it opened up the possibility that I too could play. So more and more I started putting my hand up and asking my peers, can I play down ball with you? Can I play tiggy with you? And it was met with, no, you're not allowed, you're a girl. And you go to the teachers and they kind of try to brush you off. I changed schools and I met more discrimination, and I was like circled by the boys and pelted with hard basketballs. And after this progressed, I was advised that the oval isn't safe and that the oval's no place for a girl. So instead of I tried to connect socially with my female peers, which was more auditory communication and not something that was accessible to me. So I started really fearing recess and lunch. The time came for inter-school sports, which I was looking forward to throughout my whole primary school. However, I wasn't allowed access to the school football team because the school had divided the girls' sports and the boys' sports, and I was informed that it was better to play netball because I can't play in the boys' football team. But the following year, I changed schools. In total, I changed schools 7 times, but if that gives you an idea of what it was like as someone on the spectrum. But I changed schools, and they just simply changed the name of the boys' football team to the school football team, and I was the only girl. And funnily enough, we versed the team the school that I came from, and we bet them and won the Lightning Premiership, and it was just lots and lots of fun. But that was a pretty simple but impactful, inclusive step, and it was great. Around the same time, I found like a brochure. It came in the mail, and it was asking for players to join the soccer team, the community soccer team. I was growing up in the Brimbank Council, and I was really, really excited. It's like, Mum, please join. I asked her for quite some time. I was like, please ring him. And then she's like, okay, I'll ring him. She was a bit nervous because she didn't want me getting hurt, but she was like, all right, I'll ring him. And I remember she did ring him, and she was like, oh, I've got a daughter who wanted to play soccer, to join a soccer team. And I was instantly started feeling really hot and started feeling really disheartened, because I didn't know what they were saying, but I thought because she said daughter that would change something. And it didn't. They allowed me to come and train, and I ended up playing, and I really fell in love with the sport. I was really committed. I kept training, and I was playing. I stayed with the soccer team, which was made up of boys, all the way through, and as years went on, and I was matching them with skill and strength. And it came to the point where I was 13 years old, and they needed to get parent consent for me to play the following season with them, so in the under 14s. And surprisingly, it wasn't parent consent from my parent, it was parent consent from all the parents in the team. And I didn't get that, so I was told by the club that I either couldn't play or I had to go to the women's team. But I was like 13, I was 13, 20, turning 14. I was a very small body and skinny, and it wasn't accessible to me. So I ended up finding another soccer club, and played another year with the boys team there. And they also had a girls team, and I trained with the boys team because their training was a lot better than the girls, and played with the boys team, and then also played additional in the girls team on the weekend. And then the following year I returned to the following club and then played the women. So I was about 15 when I went to the women's competition. I went into high school around this time, and I was pretty good at soccer, and the soccer team, the teacher was really, really nice. He was the coach and let me play, but he was receiving too much pressure from the students that I couldn't play. And so I trained about 3 training sessions, and then he told me, sorry, Elise, like you can't come anymore. It's just easier for everyone if you don't. And those boys that I played, that I grew up with training from a young age, there was 2 of them that actually made the Melbourne Victory Talented Player Program. And I tried out for that, and that's, I got in, and I made it with, they had the males and the females training together, and even in the competition, we played together. And it was great. And through these kind of experiences of no, you can't play, then yes, you can play. And I was good enough. I wasn't getting injured. I was like winning one-on-one contested, and sometimes not winning them. And I started to learn that it wasn't what they were telling me. They were telling me it was because I was a female, but it had to be more than that. And I just didn't understand why. I then changed. I went up a level. I went into the Women's National Premier League, and this was a much higher level than the girls team of the club was a much higher level than the male team in that club. And yet we didn't get access to very much. The men were getting paid like $600 a game, and we're even getting paid if they're on the bench or didn't play. We weren't getting paid anything, which wasn't an issue for me at the time because I was I was living with my family because I think I was 17. And they would get uniform. We had to pay for our uniform. they had access to the oval. We didn't have access to oval unless they weren't using it, as opposed to just halving the ground. And this often meant that we actually didn't get to play games. So the game would be set and the males wouldn't leave, and then our games would get cancelled. And I remember one time that the whole team did a bit of a walkout because they switched the lights off while we were playing, and our captain was saying, we'll lock up, just leave the lights on. And they said no, I'm guessing, and the whole team did a bit of a walkout and then didn't even go into the presentation. And I was like disappointed that I didn't get to play, but I was probably too young to understand why they were so angry. And I was just thinking about the trophy. I was like, I just want to get the trophy at presentation. I don't mind. And I was also, looking back, quite used to being told, no, you can't, no, you can't. And these were women who now I look back and I think about often, because they retired, most of them. Some of them moved to other clubs, and they were living with many more years than I was, and I was at the stage where I was compliant, and compliant often meant exclusion, and that's not really it's not really winning in a way. In addition to this, we were playing at a very high level, and we didn't have access to physios or strength and conditioning coaches that the guys were doing. And that, when we're playing at, so it's one below A League, so one below Melbourne Victorian and Melbourne City. And why this is important is because when I had shin splints, I went to the coach because I didn't know how to look after my body. I was only young. And the coach gave me an ice pack for my shin splints, which is a great thing to do, but then put me back on on the second half, which meant that I got fairly injured through it. And it's because in women's sport, usually there isn't the resources and the money, and the coach is also then taking the role of the physio. And it's not negligent for the coach to be giving their best advice, but there is a bit of responsibility when clubs are under-resourced or not putting the resources into creating safe accessibility to women's sport. Around this time, because I got injured, around this time I got introduced to football, and that was like a massive culture shock in a massively good way. There were just, the culture was completely different. Looking back with soccer, I always wanted to grow up and I wanted to be an elite athlete playing professional soccer, and I wanted to be like Messi and David Beckham. But I learned as being female, and I talk about in my other talks, I talk about being neurodivergent and autism a little bit more, but I learned through having autism and being a female that the world saw me differently and saw me less worthy, and I learned to hate the parts that made me different. And as time continued, my confidence decreased, and I tried to conform, which meant excluding myself. And I learned it was just too inaccessible to continue playing soccer as a female athlete. So I gave up on soccer, even though I was quite close to getting my goal of playing for Melbourne Victory. And with the women's, I went to a women's only football club, which I can't speak for mixed football clubs, but this was amazing. When I got injured, that instead of soccer just going, okay, well, now you're useless, in the football it was, okay, well, you can go and bring boxing gloves, you can do your rehab, or you can run water. There was a role, and I was still valued for being me. And I was also exposed to same-sex relationships, and that wasn't a big deal. Like, it wasn't something introduced to me. It was just like, whoa, like that's a thing. And we were players and we were women, but none of them meant anything less. I learned from being in these inclusive environments that asking if I was allowed to do something wasn't needed, and it wasn't actually something that I had to do. And women at the community level can and should have access to trainers and strength conditioning coaches. And our bodies as a female are just as valuable as the men. Being at a women's only club showed me that women are so rich, and the idea and habit of asking if girls are allowed to join, that which I learnt from as young as the age of 7, is a construct built by society. In 2020, equal access, equal opportunity, free from discrimination is a right. And to be valued, to play sport, to have the same equal access and opportunities as males is a must. It's not a question. I loved my footy and I wanted to invest in taking myself to the next level. And that was also because I knew I was giving up my soccer. But being an elite female athlete was tough there, because there was ableism in terms of my perception, other people's perception of me not understanding things, meaning they thought that I was stupid, and it meant that I was less intelligent. But if we focus just on the female side of it, we weren't allowed access to the club's facility. So we would go training, again, often we'd need to wait for someone else to come down. This was in the Bulldogs to open up, and training would then be late. But we then also, after we had finished training, we had to do our strength program, and it doesn't cost any money to use the weights, or it doesn't cost any money to use the mats or the bike or anything like that. But we had to go and drive to a partnered gym to do our, which meant we were coming home at finishing at 10:30, and it was not, we weren't able to commit the same hours as we could. But when I changed VFL clubs and at Essendon, and we were able to have that go to train, then do our gym program at the gym, it meant a massive difference, and also meant that if you are in the injured list, you can do your rehab part of the club. And it's something that...
You know, we've got 1 minute. You've got 1 minute, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When I look back at lack of inclusion and accessibility, what it comes down to, I think it's perception, the burden of time and effort, the perception of what you believe is possible if you invest in women, the perception of whose job it is to make the changes, the lack of visibility, the lack of adaptability and coming up with new approaches, and valuing financial investment in women's sport so it can grow to be as good as the men's sport who have that financial backing. When I grew up, I wanted to be a soccer player, and I didn't want this to be, I didn't know that what I wanted to be was a female soccer player. It was only that as I started to mature and I was met with questions of others highlighting my gender, that I learnt that it was a different pathway, and it was a harder pathway. Women are amazing, we are resilient, but we shouldn't need to be resilient with showing up as a female. The limitations of being a female, just like the limitations of having a disability, lie in the environment and in the approach, not the person. Thanks for your time. Thank you for your time. I probably want to share one quote, I think, and I can't reference who said this quote, but it stuck with me, and it was men need to perform to belong, and women need to belong to perform. And if we can take that into the importance of having an inclusive culture, I think that it's not my quote, but I think that's pretty powerful. Thanks.
It's a fantastic way to finish your presentation. It was amazing to listen to, I guess, your experience, but also your absolute determination with all the barriers that have come before you, and how you've actually persisted and kept going with your dreams to play sports. So congratulations, and no doubt that's what also contributes to you making such an amazing sportswoman. We're sort of running a bit short of time. We've got a couple of comments that I'll just read out. No question, I just think Elise is amazing. Very hard to listen to her long list of challenges and inequities, but pleased to see she is kept going. Thank you. Please keep sharing your story. Hi, Elise. What an inspiring personal account. Highly impressive. Thanks, Elise, for sharing your personal stories. Great story, Elise. Best wishes for the future. Great quote. Great final quote. Women just need to be there and they can contribute. So thank you so much, Elise. We also did get a lot of questions that have come through for Karen, but we might just monitor time and see if we can ask those a bit later. Otherwise, we will get some answers to those that we can send out after the webinar today. So thank you, everyone, and thanks, Elise.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, I would now like to welcome our next presenter, Professor Claire Hannon. Claire is a preeminent scholar focused on encouraging women and girls in sport and physical activity in particular. Claire has related extensive experience in translating research into strategies to build community and organisational capacity. Claire has led international and local projects, including recruiting and retaining women in sport and physical activity programs in Malaysia, and developing and evaluating systems, policies and programs to attract and retain women as leaders and participants in sport and physical activity in Australia. Claire also supports national to local government sport and corporate organisations to create no boundaries for girls and women in sport. Welcome, Claire. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynley. And thank you, Mayor and Brimbank Council. It's an absolute honour to be here, and Victoria University has a strong relationship with Brimbank Council, and we're proud to be there. I'd like to share my screen, and so based on what you can see here, before I start, I'd like to also begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Now, to start with, what I thought would assist, apart from putting things down on slides, was to start off with talking about, well, what are some of the benefits for girls and women to be leaders as well as to play sport. First of all, starting off with women and girls, an Ernst & Young research showed out of 821 women that were interviewed globally in a range of sectors, 90% of these women, and these women were executive women, 90% of these women had played sport when they were young. 96% of these women who were top executives had played sport. Now that shows a direct relationship between the importance of sport and girls and women when they have their careers as leaders. What these women felt was that sport helped them in relation to having the ability to complete projects, their determination, the ability to build teams, and also motivate others around them. Now, not only were there benefits for women and girls, but also for clubs. In relation to local sport clubs in the community, what we find is that there's social and economic benefits. Research continues to show the value that girls and women as leaders and players in clubs bring to, and in the respect of what they do, they provide the voice of what girls need as leaders and players. They increase participation capacity, they enhance financial performance, they are associated with good social responsibility, good governance, leadership and decision making, and they help eliminate gender-based discrimination and violent supportive attitudes. Now, COVID-19 has been challenging for all of us, and local sport clubs are a prime example of this happening. Now, I've defined, and if we think about women as and girls as leaders and players in clubs, I classify not only them but members as a whole in 3 areas basically for clubs when members are returning. And these three areas, first of all, you've got one group of members who are keen to return. They just want sport to start. And so that's easy when bringing them back. You've then got another group who participate for a purpose. So they might become a coach or an official for a reason. They might play for a reason. It might be to keep fit. It might be for family reasons. How do you bring them back as a club? The unique aspect that local sport clubs have is social connection. We're yearning for that. And social connection, and how are we promoting that on our websites? Also, with this group, it could be the need to look at our programs and how are we bringing families back together, or how are we increasing those social connections. We've then got one more group, and that's the group that's sitting on the fence. They don't mind whether they go back or not. So how are we going to bring them back? And they're a really tough group. That's where what we're finding with clubs is that they're enhancing their programs, where they're changing them, particularly for women and girls. In a less competitive environment is more inviting. So for example, an athletics club, rather than running around the track, the athletics track, they've joined with a local jogging group. And what they will do is they're going to run when they can after the stages have finished. They're going to be running around the river together. So it's a less competitive environment. We've got other clubs that, based on COVID-19, online meetings have meant that people actually don't then have to go to a club which is cold and doesn't particularly have the best coffee or tea. They can, in fact, they're going to continue that after the COVID stage and have meetings online in the comfort of their own home. Now, thanks to the Vic Uni students that I teach in sport participation, what I got them to do is they found from strategies, COVID-19 strategies, and what are local clubs through to national strategies, what's been conducted during this time. These are just a couple of examples. For example, Coburg Basketball Club, they're getting their senior players to provide tips on skills on their local Facebook page for their junior members to watch. They're also providing mini training competitions. Victoria University has a Thrive Active Living program, and this is a prime resource that's free for everyone. So this is a great one for local sport clubs to access, for state sport organisations to access. And what they provide, they've got a Strava running club, they've got fitness training, they have programs for kids that they run called Kids Plus Active. They've got exercise advisors, and they've even got, I don't know how active this is, but they've got Xbox game tournaments. So it's very much of an interactive program that you can access. There's a range of these around. Moving on though, when we're specifically, and I've been asked to focus on women as leaders in local sport clubs, one project that I was involved with, a colleague, Associate Professor Melinda Craig and myself, we worked with the Moreland Council. They wanted to know what attracts and retains women as leaders. So after surveying 159 local club managers, as well as women who are leaders, there were 4 key factors that we identified that attracted and retained them into clubs. Now, based on these, first of all, the individual, what attracted and retained women as leaders? From an individual perspective, these women believed that being involved in a sporting community is what attracted them. That comes back to that social connection. Keeping fit as an official or coach was a key factor, and learning new skills. We move on to club membership. It was developing social contacts, and that was really important, what they liked. It was the peer influence of other leaders, encouraging them. It was the standard of the leaders, and it was club management, creating an inclusive environment. Moving on to location and amenities, what was important was accessibility. It was the standard of the environment and playing facilities, and it was the convenience of the location. Finally, was the club environment, ensuring it was female and family friendly. There was support for leaders, there was a social program, and there were leadership opportunities. They were key areas to attract and retain women. So bringing this down, it's basically 3 key areas within a club environment that's important. It's the physical, social, and cultural aspects that are key. Examples that came up during this time was having, for example, roles, and having roles that were advertised online regarding leadership. It was identifying the flexibility of the roles, and that may be through job sharing, online meetings, and linking to state and local based grants. The Office for Women in Victoria for Sport and Recreation, they provide women for leaders for scholarships, which are really important. Another grant announced yesterday was the 2021 Sporting Clubs Grant Program. This is where the state government is going to provide up to $5,000 for local sport clubs regarding training coaches, officials, and volunteers. They're also paying up to $5,000 to improve club operational effectiveness. For example, one successful club received $5,000, and this was a tennis club, to develop a plan for increasing membership, participation, and sustainability. One thing we also need to be mindful of is that at times women tend to lack confidence and fear judgment. And because of that, there's a need to ensure, how do you as a local sport club make women successful in their leadership role? And having other girls and women see these women in successful positions then creates the saying, you can be what you can see. And that we are an environment that is creating and encouraging more women as leaders. Now, I've just brain dumped here, and it's a checklist of examples. And these examples is of how to build the capacity of clubs to attract and retain women as leaders. This brain dump has been based on the research that I've conducted from a local perspective, state perspective. There's lots of other examples, but this is all I could fit onto a page. What I'm going to do is read through each one, and in your mind, I would like you to say yes or no. And if it's yes, fantastic, it's reinforcing. If it's no, it might provide some new opportunities for you to move and help advance women as leaders. Do you have a plan to attract, develop, and retain women as leaders in your club? Does your website illustrate the social connection it provides to women? Does your strategic plan include a focus on women and girls as leaders in your club? Are the leadership roles in your club flexible? And by flexible, I'm referring to job sharing or even leadership roles for 6 months. Do you build confidence and leadership skills of girls who can move into senior leadership roles? Do you provide professional development and grow the leadership capacity of women? And professional development might come in the form of linking with another community centre or club and looking at a collaborative professional development for women as leaders. Is exposure visible, such as on websites, of diverse groups of women in a range of leadership roles? Do you promote leadership pathways for girls and women? And if you do, are these showcased? Do you ask women what needs to happen to encourage them to be a coach, official, committee member, or team manager? Now, based on the 10 minutes that I've been asked to present, and that's 10 minutes according to my clock, based on the presentation, we've provided a quick summation of the benefits for not only the women, but also for clubs as to why we should have more girls and women as leaders and players in sport. COVID-19 brings challenges for us. However, there's member groups that we need to look at in order to bring them back and how we can bring them back. There's factors and strategies to attract and retain women. And by doing that, we've turned that into a checklist to assist and help with reflection as to how we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. That was really interesting, and I think congratulations to Victoria University for leading so much research over the last few years on this particular topic. It's great to have, I guess, that body of evidence that can actually help back up what we know from our practical experience working and supporting community sporting clubs. So to have that is fantastic. Might just put one question to you. Why is it important for clubs to focus on participation than higher level performance?
I think clubs can participate in both areas, and participation, you need to have grassroots sport in order to have that pathway. Pathways are vital, and for girls to see and women to see pathways so that they can be another release that we've just heard about is exciting. But also there's another pathway, and that might just purely be participation and not go to that elite level, but knowing that that exists too is really important for people. So I'm not quite sure whether I've answered the question in the way that you want to, but I suppose it's a matter of emphasising that there's a number of channels, but there needs to be a number of opportunities that local clubs provide for participants, that's being players, for women. That also includes leaders though, because for girls to be the club team captain and to have that opportunity and for them to have the profile and for them to see pathways going through, I think that's just as important too, because we want to keep members at our club throughout their life stages, and for them to see that is important.
Yeah. And just one question from our participants. What about clubs having a gender equality policy? How important is that?
Look, I think a gender equality policy is important, but I think all policies should be gender neutral anyway. So rather than having a standalone one, I think it should be embedded throughout every policy so that it becomes one that I'm very much into embedding and sustaining strategies rather than having something that's a standalone. And I think that's important. Gender equality policies are, maybe they're needed now for some clubs because they're not at that stage. Yes, bring it on. But hey, for you then not to need it, congratulations, and embed it within all your other policies. I think that is a sense of achievement.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Claire, for that great presentation. Thank you. Now, everybody, we're going to move into a panel discussion with two of our local clubs. I'd like to welcome Josh Wheeler and Brimbank from Brimbank Bucks Rugby Union Club, and also Amanda Stella from Calder United Football Club, who are part of our panel of local club leaders. Both these clubs have had great success in engaging and retaining girls and women in their respective clubs. We will start by having a discussion around how the clubs have implemented successful strategies and initiatives, and then throw to the audience also for some questions. So just keep putting them through the Q&A. I'm just going to check one more. We've just got a question. Are we able to get a copy of the presentation? I think, Claire, you'd be happy to share your presentation, and we'll send out a bit of a pack for everybody after who participated in the webinar. So thank you. Okay. Now I'd like to perhaps start with Josh, if I could ask you this question. Can you tell us a bit about your female participation numbers over the past 3 to 5 years and how you've been able to engage and retain females at your club?
Yep, certainly. I should acknowledge I'm actually this club secretary. I think I got introduced as the president there before, so out of respect of my president, I probably should acknowledge that. Look, we have, like our general membership profile, it is fluctuating. We have grown from a club from about 7 years old, you know, sort of 10, 11, 12 members, up to, I think we came over 200 members last season. Obviously, we haven't been able to accomplish those same lofty figures this season. I think we got up to about 6 before it all went a bit pear-shaped. But our membership generally has focused on about 30% female participation. We did start off as a junior club. That was mandated by the rugby, so it's rugby union, it's our sport. Rugby Union Victoria required us to start off as a junior club. So the advantage of that, of course, is that we up to under 10s we play mixed gender. Always, you know, our teams have predominantly been or had a mixed gender component. Majority of our club membership is probably from a Pacifica sort of based background as well, a Polynesian based background. There's a few characters around the club like myself that doesn't have such a strong ethnic sort of profile as that. So obviously with that, there's a very strong family involvement and also a cultural involvement, I suppose, with rugby union, particularly. Equally, a lot of us are immigrants. In fact, I'd say probably, you know, over 60-70% of us are immigrants as well, recent immigrants in the club as well. So that, you know, that touch point there about socialization or creating a social environment was really important. We've also have one of our founding members is a woman. We've always had obviously a woman or a number of women on our committee, and that has been important. Talking about, I suppose, quotas and to kind of help us, I suppose, this, you know, we could sort of have a debate about that, but we do have a strategic plan, and in that it does identify targets for ourselves to try to achieve. So we don't always achieve them, and it does fluctuate every year, but we have, you know, achieved most of our targets, especially with the junior girls teams. Once we get to under 15, we had two junior women's girls touch teams the last couple of years, and they've been a recurrent catchment. And our next ambition really, as of last year, we had a senior men's team. So we've finally reached the stage where Rugby Victoria has allowed us to create senior teams. So our sort of short-term goal, which we realise is ambitious, and we've been told by a number of other clubs that it's over ambitious, is to look to field a women's team in the next season or two. We did actually start the season trying to do that pre-COVID-19. I think we accepted that perhaps we were over ambitious this year, but we won't give up. We'll give it another go. It's in our mandate, and you know, that's one of our strategic goals, and we are getting strong support, I think, both from council, obviously, but also Rugby Union Victoria, Rugby Victoria all are behind us in that. Recognising in particular, I think, like most of the other sports, and as I heard a few years ago at a council briefing, AFL didn't create women's sport. Obviously, it's very media rich at the moment, but particularly or soccer or football, the traditional football, and you know, rugby union have got massive growth in the female sport participation area. So that's you know, I think we're advantaged by that. You know, that gives us that confidence to continue to grow it. But like season by season, recurrent participation from our members is always difficult, and that's something we've also defined as a target. We're trying to achieve 80%, you know, recycling of members from season to season. Obviously, it's not gender specific, but we've got growth patterns around particular groups.
Thank you so much, Josh. Now I'd like to ask the same question to Amanda from the Calder United Football Club. Can you talk a little bit about your female participation numbers over the past 3 to 5 years, and how you've been able to not just engage but retain females at your club?
So yeah, I'm very, very fortunate enough to be part of this amazing female club. So we're a leading NPL club based out of Keilor Park. This is our 5th year. We started in 2016 with 4 teams. So we probably would have had about 75 girls aged between 12 and 25 playing in the league. Over the past few years, we've been fortunate enough to have a few extra age groups added to the competition structure. So this year we were able to bring in some mini Roos teams under the Calder umbrella. And last year there was an under 12s girls comp put in. So this year we would have had roughly about 130 registered females, girls, aged between sort of 8 and 30. So for us, being a female-only club, we obviously pride ourselves in being able to give all of our girls the best opportunity and the best environment to do what they love doing. As far as the female presence across our committee and our volunteers, that continues to grow every year. We, over the past 3 years, our committee has now got to a point where we have 5 females and 3 males, which is a great achievement. It's taken some time, and it's sometimes can be very daunting for parents, especially mums, to give up the time to get involved with these sorts of things. But I think as they see more people doing it, and the difference it can make to the girls, I'm finding more and more people are actively getting involved. So, and that goes with coaches. Coaches is something, female coaches is something that's important to me. We do have a few this year, but that's something that we really need to grow on, and that comes around giving young girls the opportunity to do their licenses and mums and stuff the opportunity to fit it all in, and having a flexible option there, because that is something that I think needs to be improved on, so those opportunities can be given out to get more leaders, more coaches in the female space.
Great, thank you. Amanda, you've sort of highlighted some of the challenges that you're finding, particularly around getting female coaches. Josh, what are some of the challenges that your club have experienced, I guess, in having more women involved in your sport and club?
There was one, I suppose, touched on earlier before. Obviously, the level of facilities has been a bit of an issue.
Yeah.
Our existing fields would have been an advantage. We've got a massive playground, so I think that's a space that obviously family members and come in and are attracted to during the training periods. But even in recent years, we've been very fortunate to have quite a significant upgrade, but it's a one field upgrade. So it has a limitation of changing rooms. We have 2 changing rooms as part of our club rooms. So if we have multiple home games, we can't run gender-based changing rooms, which is obviously quite a significant issue there as well. I suppose as well, low socioeconomic and movement of people as well. So whether it's within the wider metropolitan Melbourne district or out of state. Particularly, I think at committee level, retaining women has been quite difficult there. Even as I said, we've always been able to retain numbers, but not to the numbers that we would like, and definitely not to the point of the 50% or some other figure. And then, like I must say, probably like the boys, I suppose, but listening to this discussion today, making sure that our pathways for, at least in the early years, girls, and obviously that's what we're trying to deal with now, women, making sure that pathway is clearly communicated out in that wider, the wider environment, to bring people down to the fields, and when they do come, they understand that this is the place that's been allocated to them formally by the club, and we're sort of organised. We're not, we're all volunteers. We try to be as organised as we can, and I think our mantra is try to be better than we were last year. But I have, based on my experience when I went out with my son, even just walking down and being able to identify an age group and say, yes, that's my team, that's my cohort. So making sure that structure's in place. So I think in the last couple of years, particularly, that's why the under 15 youth girls have been particularly successful, because there was a coach that put up their hand. The club was committed at an early stage, and of course we were committed to running the team, and lo and behold, suddenly we had too many girls and we had to field 2 teams, and lo and behold, at the end of the season they had to play each other in the final because they both got through to the semi-final. So there's success, but we're challenged at the start of the season to have our organisation systems in place, and if we don't, that's where we find obviously we get a bit of a trip up there.
Great, thank you. Just a question to both Amanda and Josh that's come through from our participants. My club struggles with retention of women from different racial backgrounds. Have you got any suggestions to increase our retention rates for them?
Yeah, thanks. I saw that question come in, actually. I think that's while I was talking. I think the strength, I think of any, whatever race we are, I think that social cohesion, I think, is a really important element. and kind of create that space for the diversity. So we have, you know, while it might be for ourselves, you know, a strong sort of Polynesian base, there's a lot of, you know, it's the sport that anchors us all together. So we're you know, we're ranged from Irish and Kiwis and Aussies and Fijians, and we've got a Serbian who's been there forever. So, you know, the stories around our game are shared, but I think it's the you know, it's the involvement in the game, and you know, sort of looking at our vision here, it's about the opportunity to play, and I think we've spoken about that earlier as well, but to be involved in rugby union, and hopefully that, you know, I suppose hopefully that's greater than the race or the ability to kind of move in and out of the club, because in fact there's a wider community, you know, a wider local government area that we want to be part of.
Yeah, terrific. Amanda, do you have any comments?
I feel we're very very good with our cultural diversity at our club. We have, and I think a lot of it revolves around including everybody in as many things as you can. So we know we have a lot of fundraisers, we have a lot of themed dinner nights, we have, and I think with that sort of environment, it gives everybody a feeling that they can belong. So we might have a Greek night, we might have Italian night, we might have Sivalaki night, and it's about showing that we respect and include all cultures. And I think once you can get that diverse group of people working together, it will attract the same. So it sort of naturally happens, but you do have to start somewhere, and I think that's it, compared with all the other things that are involved with running a club. I think that's one of the easiest ones, including everybody and doing things that will bring everybody together is probably the first step in successfully being able to create that environment.
Yeah, that's great. This is a question for you, Amanda, that's come through. What are the 3 key things which attract women to your particular club?
Clearly, I think our success on the pitch, we've been very, very lucky. We've had, you know, across all age groups, we've done very well in the past 4 years. Obviously, this was the 5th year that's been very interrupted. So I think that's one thing. I think a big thing that I think does attract people is our culture that we have. We do pride ourselves on the family orientated feel at the club. So we might you know, be at that top level and have that elite stamp on us, but we're very humble in the things we do. So I think that's a big part why people will want to come to Calder, but then also really want to stay there. The friendships, you know, so many of the friends have created so many friendships for themselves and the parents. We have grandparents that come, you know, and get involved, and I think that feeling is something that is very hard to start, but once you do, and once you get the people that have that same vision on board with you, you can achieve that. You can achieve that environment. And I think probably the third thing is we've been very fortunate enough to have some great coaches along the way. So you know, 3 coaches are still with us that, you know, were there the first year. So I think that's another thing that does attract people to Calder.
That's great. Now I've got another question that's come through. This is for both Josh and Amanda. What have you found to be the most effective way to recruit women and girls? Social media, word of mouth, direct marketing? What's kind of worked for you? Or is it a combination?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think for us, it's probably the combination, more likely that the first 2 rather than the last one. We tend to run a summer program as well, which is around, you know, more around community sort of engagement, you know, skills based but participation only. So it's run as a mixed gender program. Anybody can come down and sort of try and buy and head home week in, week out, whichever is how much as they want to do. And I think for us that gives us that time to, shall we say, recruit. And in fact, I think possibly that would be our strongest around the female participation during the summer program. The boys sort of tend to come and drift back a little bit you know, at the start of the formal rugby season, but if we can engage with the younger women, maybe as well, because the nature of the format of the female dedicated sport at the female youth sector, you know, is the smaller group, is the smaller the non-touch or the touch rugby based, so that summer program rolls more readily into you know, the winter season as well. But that we also, you know, I must say as a counterpoint, you know, because we're a winter sport, our sport allocation formally is at winter, so balancing that summer program, you know, making sure that we can work with council to do that, because we find it incredibly hard to obviously turn the tap on when the formal date arrives and expect everybody to walk back in the door. You know, we're realistic enough to say that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Amanda, what about you? What's
so we're actually it's probably the opposite to that for me. I would like to be able to take every girl that wants to come to Calder, but unfortunately the way the competition structure is, we have a certain amount of teams at an age group that has a quota on the amount of kids that can be in that team. So for me, that's probably the biggest challenge, being able to retain as many people as you like, as girls that you like, that can continue at that level, and still give new players every year the opportunity to, you know, to live their dream and get to be a Matilda one day. So I don't have, we don't really have a problem attracting people wanting to come. We run trials every year that has, you know, so many gorgeous girls out there that really want to come and play, and it's the worst time of year. I hate it, because you just we don't have the room to accommodate everybody. That's a challenge in itself, but unfortunately that's the level that we're at and the competition structure that we're playing in. And yeah, for me, it's not about so much attracting them, it's being able to give everyone a fair go is more probably our issue.
Yeah, great. And also, just for both of you, I mean, what's your sort of thinking at the moment, knowing, you know, the situation we're in with COVID restrictions? What have both your clubs been able to sort of think into the near future around how you're going to kind of get your club members back, and how you're going to manage that? Because I guess it's been probably challenging keeping in contact during the last few months. So
yeah, we've had very limited committee meetings. We actually had one, and we formally agreed to proceed with the season and make the announcement, and 2 days later stage 4 lockdown came in. I was in one of the early postcodes that got locked out of training, but as part of that, sort of, we discussed that particularly. Sorry, that was around the senior team. We decided yes, would proceed with the senior team, but would halt, you know, formally with the juniors. So I mean, our hope with the summer program, and obviously, you know, the continuing support of council, is that we would look to be running a, you know, participation only rugby summer program, really just to socialise and really reconnect with the community. So that's, you know, that's really a strong point. Obviously, COVID-19. I think in the sort of the Pacific-based, Polynesian-based community, they've probably been quite hard hit here locally as well, and obviously this western side of town we've been very hard hit as well. So that's very important. The other thing is, you know, for us, we were very fortunate to win the tender for Bon Thomas Reserve, so we'll be formally moving our sports field, and we will be going to a larger pavilion and 2 fields next year, because we've, you know, significantly outgrown our existing facility. So while that, you know, has been a bit spoiled, I think, as a lead-in for this season, I think we're going to try to leverage that as an opportunity. And because it's more centrally located in that Brimbank area as well, we really hope that that's going to make everybody, you know, much easier for people to come back and participate in whichever way that is. And if that means we're all around on a Friday night having a sausage sizzle and just throwing the ball around, then I mean, that's really what it's about for those first few months anyway. Yeah,
that's a great point. Amanda, what about at your club?
So we've been, you know, we've got some really great team managers, coaches, leadership groups amongst teams that have really kept everybody together. We've sort of, every team has had regular Zoom calls. We've given out numerous train at home information, coaches connecting with players regularly. We've done as much as we possibly can. We've had social media competitions and all that sort of stuff, which I think is really important to keep the girls engaged. For me, the biggest headache I have at the moment in planning for next year, and I'm hoping Karen's listening to me and she can make a note of this. I have already flagged it, but for us in the competition structure that we're in, we have set age groups. My vision for 2021 is to retain every single one of our players. For me, it's not an option to say to girls at the end of this year, I'm sorry for the year you've had, but you're going to have to retrial for your position. I don't want to, clearly I don't want to do that. I don't think it's in anyone at the club's best interest. So, but for me to retain them, I need some flexibility given to the age groups that we have, because we have a situation where pretty much half of every team will age out. And when we get to the top, I'm going to have maybe a dozen girls that we just don't have room for. And for me, that is causing a lot of concern for planning next year. And I think it's the female football where we're at right now, it is still it's still young. We have a long way to go. We have, great group of girls in the Matildas, and we have, the World Cup. We have all those wonderful things happening for the game, but we need to keep retaining these girls for as long as we can. And in our competitive structure that we're in, it's already difficult to do that. Not every player is going to become a senior player. You have a certain amount every year that unfortunately go back to playing community sport. But for 2021, my vision is to give every girl that committed to us this year and committed to working hard and has continued to work hard at home, the chance to get out there next year. So for me, that's my number one goal at the moment, to make that possible.
Great, thank you very much, Josh and Amanda. We've got one question that's come through from the participants for our Mayor, Councillor Georgina Papafario. Are the Matildas coming to Brimbank?
Well, I hope they are. I hope they are. I think Karen may have a bit more information in that field than what I would, but I'll be very, very disappointed if we didn't get it. I know Football Victoria knows how I feel about the Matildas and my passion for having the home ground here in Brimbank. So, yeah, fingers crossed, and hopefully we'll find out in a few weeks, as Karen mentioned earlier.
Thank you, Councillor. For those that aren't aware, Brimbank Council has put in an expression of interest for Sydenham Park to be a potential site for the home of the Matildas. So that decision is still being made and hasn't been announced, but we remain hopeful. So I'd now like to hand over to Kiralee Myers, who's going to she's going to discuss how clubs can start to implement change by accessing resources and some of the supports that we have available. So I'd now like to welcome Kiralee. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lindley. I'll just try and get this screen up here. Perfect. So thanks very much, Lindley, and thank you to all the audience members for tuning in to this online webinar today. I really hope you've been inspired just like I have, and have taken away some really innovative ideas to embed into your clubs and organisations. I know sometimes with forums and webinars such as this, the amount of information presented can sometimes get a little bit overwhelming. So if this is perhaps how you might be feeling, I really encourage you to grab onto maybe just one or two things that has really sat with you to be able to take this back to your clubs and organisations. Start somewhere small, and you can always revisit your learnings and continue to build on the small wins into the future. I'm a big believer in doing something is better than doing nothing at all. So to help you along this journey of embedding some of the ideas you may have heard today and ensure your club is set up to enable more girls and women to join and participate in sport, I want to highlight some of the resources and support that are available for sport clubs and sport organisations, in particular within Brimbank. Given the time, I'm going to speed through quite quickly in this section, but this presentation will be sent out via email as part of the follow-up after the completion of the webinar. So sorry if I do skip through, but I do want to make sure that you guys can enjoy the rest of your night after 6. So I'll start with some resources that are available within the sport sector for sport clubs and organisations. The first one is Doing Sport Differently. So Vic Sport, Vic Health and the Centre for Sport and Social Impact at La Trobe University have partnered to launch the Doing Sport Differently initiative that supports clubs and organisations to design and deliver sport that engages people who are less active. As part of this initiative, there's an online hub of resources to help the sport sector to do sport differently, to attract and engage and retain less active Victorians in sport. Included in this fantastic document, it outlines 6 principles that clubs can use to help design and deliver sport programs to attract new participants, including girls and women. You can see a summary of these principles on the infograph displayed on the screen. Vic Health have also partnered with Vic Sport and La Trobe to release a 3-part Doing Sport Differently webinar series, and both of these can be accessed on the links shown on the screen. The next resource is one that you may be familiar with, and that's Vic Health's This Girl Can campaign. It aims to inspire women to get active however, wherever and whenever they choose without being judged. Clubs have the opportunity to become a supporter of this campaign and deliver programs that encourage participation by women and girls. There is also a suite of campaign resources, including the This Girl Can branding, that clubs can utilise to promote their programs. Again, you can find more information via the link shown. The next resource I'd like to highlight is the Victorian Government's Change Our Game initiative. It's an initiative that stemmed from the inquiry into women and girls in sport and active recreation. It was created to work towards levelling the playing field for women and girls. The website shown promotes funding and leadership opportunities that clubs can access. And the initiative also involves the Change Our Game ambassadors and champions that can help influence positive change. You can check out the Women in Sport Leadership Centre and the Ambassador and Champions videos, again, all on the website listed. Just a quick snapshot of some other resources that are out there. So the Women's Sport Australia is the peak national advocacy body for women in sport. Suncorp Team Girls is a Netball Australia initiative to help promote girls' participation in sport. And Clearinghouse for Sport is a fantastic resource to find out more about female participation in sport and can assist with facts and statistics to complement clubs' funding applications. So it's a good one to check out if you're going for any funding. And finally, the resources for Brimbank Council. So Brimbank Council are committed to supporting clubs to better engage and retain girls and women in sport and active recreation. Each club has a sport and recreation officer that can assist clubs with their business plans, in particular to focus on increasing female participation at their clubs. We also have myself, the Active Communities Development Officer, that sits in the sport and recreation team, that can work with clubs to plan and develop programs that can help engage and retain marginalised community groups into sport and active recreation. In the broader organisation, we also have officers in youth services, inclusion and diversity and disability support that can provide expertise around engaging particular community groups. Sport and recreation also hosts club development forums, such as the one we're doing today, to help clubs develop their knowledge and skill set. We also have a strong strategic focus that helps us plan and deliver outcomes for the broader Brimbank community. A couple of documents related to the sport and active recreation area that Councillor Georgina mentioned earlier include our sport facility development plan, physical activity strategy, and the Female in Sport and Active Recreation Action Plan, which I'll speak more of later in this presentation. I'd like to highlight a few funding opportunities as well that clubs can access through the sports sector. The first one being the Active Clubs Grant. This is a Vic Health providing financial support to sport clubs to help encourage more Victorians to participate in sport through two specific focus areas: increasing female participation opportunities and supporting social and modified sport programs for less active Victorians. In 2020, there were two tiers of funding, $3,000 and $12,000 grants, which a number of Brimbank clubs were successful in their applications. It would be great to see more Brimbank clubs accessing this funding and plan and deliver more programs for girls and women in Brimbank. 2021 funding dates have not yet been released. However, you can keep an eye out on our Sport Club webpage or through the Sport Club newsletter to keep up to date with funding. There's also the Victorian SRV also offer a range of grants to sport clubs, and councils can apply on behalf of clubs for some of this funding as well. You can see a range of different funding pools listed on the presentation slide, and you can find out more via the link as well. I want to quickly highlight this one as well because it's quite relevant right now. So Victorian government are offering a grant to help organisations to engage with the community through the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a great opportunity for clubs to think about how they can continue to engage females right now, whether through a digital program, an online social catch-up initiative, or a program that they can look forward to when restrictions ease. But please note that this funding closes on Monday. Again, just highlighting a few different resources or funding that is available as well. So Vic Sport always put out the different funding that's available for sport clubs. Sports Community is a great resource as well, and the Grants Hub down the bottom also can help sport clubs with finding out what grants are available. I also want to take this time to announce the Brimbank Community Grants Program. So it has changed now to the Brimbank Community Recovery Grants 2020 program. And this is to adapt to the ever-changing environment caused by COVID-19. And it will provide a one-off grant to assist community groups with innovative recovery programs. It provides a great opportunity for sport clubs to develop and deliver a program or initiative that engages and retains females in sport and active recreation. Council is particularly interested in applications that build community connections, improve digital literacy, create healthy lifestyles, celebrate cultural and diversity, or create employment and volunteer opportunities. This information has been sent out to Brimbank Sport Clubs, but you can also find more information on the website listed. Also available are some council participation programs. So we plan and deliver a range of these for clubs to become involved in. They are designed to engage less active community members into sport and active recreation. Some of these include Intersport, which is a subsidy program to help children living in Brimbank participate in community sport. This year we've seen, again, COVID-19 affect a lot of programs, and unfortunately Intersport has been one of them, and it has been postponed due to the uncertainty of sporting seasons. Normally at this time of the year, Intersport applications for priority applications would be open. However, due to current circumstances, the opening date has been postponed and will depend on the summer sporting season start date. We'll endeavour to keep you updated on when this program recommences and encourage all sport clubs to apply to be an Intersport club. The financial and personal wellbeing of our community remains our priority. This is why for future Intersport funding periods, Brimbank Council will be making some changes to the eligibility criteria to allow families that have been impacted financially by COVID-19 to now apply for this grant. The other participation program that we partner with Football Victoria with is our free one-day event showcasing and encouraging female participation in soccer, including playing, coaching and refereeing. There are opportunities to join in for a bit of social fun or as a competitive seven-a-side tournament. The event really caters for all ages and abilities. Again, unfortunately, the event was cancelled this year, but we're really looking forward to it running in 2020 if restrictions allow. We also have Be Active Brimbank, which is a campaign launched last year to encourage the community to be active, no matter your age, cultural background, fitness level or ability. It provides digital and offline resources to help people find physical activity opportunities. Clubs can use the Be Active Facebook posts to keep their members and volunteers active during these restrictions. Inter Tennis is a free 10-day festival of tennis activities at local tennis clubs across Brimbank. Again, activities that are offered at entry-level participation programs that are social, flexible and inclusive. The aim is to engage community members that may have never tried tennis or have not picked up a racket in many years. More information on all of these programs can be found on the Brimbank website under Be Active Brimbank. Finally, I just want to introduce the recently adopted Women's Participation in Sport and Active Recreation in Melbourne's West Action Plan for Change 2020 to 2025. Brimbank has partnered with 6 councils in Melbourne's West: Wyndham, Maribyrnong, Moonee Valley, Melton, Hobsons Bay and Melbourne, Women's Health West and Sport and Recreation Victoria to develop the final action plan. The action plan provides strategic direction on challenging the gendered barriers to women's participation in sport and active recreation. The vision is for women and girls in Melbourne's West to experience equity in access and participation in sport and active recreation. Through the development and implementation of this action plan, Council would like to work with sport clubs and other sport and active recreation providers to work on these actions. The action plan was adopted by Brimbank Council on the 21st of July and will be formally launched by all partners with an online event on Friday, the 18th of September. All Brimbank clubs will receive registration information when available. So thank you very much. As I said, I whipped through that one, but the presentation will be sent out. And if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to your Sport and Recreation Officer or myself at Council. And I'll hand back to Lindley to be able to wrap us up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kiralee, for that update. And we're right on time as scheduled to finish. I'm sure everyone's got plenty to do with their evening as we, it's a bit wild and windy out there where I'm living in the western suburbs. So I'm sure it's through the rest of Melbourne as well. We don't really have any time for questions from Kiralee. However, we will be providing all the information that's been presented tonight. The PowerPoints will be also distributed to people that have participated. And as I mentioned before, this webinar will also be available to look at again if there's any club members that weren't able to make it. I'd really love to have really enjoyed actually listening to all the speakers, and it's just been amazing to hear, I guess, the enthusiasm from not just our speakers, but obviously the participation from clubs tonight to know that this is such an important issue. And, you know, I sort of reflect back in the last 5 years, there's actually been enormous, I guess, you know, progress around women's participation in sport. And obviously we've got a long way to go, but, you know, I feel like it's definitely heading in the right direction, which is great. So thank you again to all our speakers for your time and providing all your insight and ideas as well as your expertise. And also thanks for the audience and particularly the clubs that are all volunteers for participating as well. I did mention in the beginning of our session that we had some lucky door prizes. So I'm just going to make an announcement of the successful winners.
Lindley, before you do that, could I just say a couple of words, please?
Certainly, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Look, thank you to all the presenters for your presentation today and sharing your experience. It was wonderful to hear from all of you. Also, it's wonderful to see a number of participants from various organisations and clubs attend this forum. It's really, really important that you do build strong connections and partnerships with the council. And one thing that was really left out tonight, I think, is it's really important that clubs do engage their councillors in their activities and events, because believe me, the councillors can make a difference and support you in many, many ways. So once again, thank you for coming, and over to you, Lindley. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really important point, Councillor Papafario. Just to remember that, you know, we've got 11 councillors that are your community representatives here at Brimbank City Council. They always are keen to be involved in any of the events that the sporting clubs are running, and have been actively over their term over the last 4 years, really participating in a lot of things that clubs have put on. I mean, unfortunately, we haven't been able to do much of that this year, but keep it in mind for the future, because I'm sure they will all be very keen, as we all are, to get back out into the community. So I'll just make the announcements. We have Dina Stockwell, Maria Casa, Maria Abfolta, Sophia Hubery, and Mel Triculio. Sorry if I pronounced any of those incorrectly. Congratulations. Kiralee and her team will be in contact via email to get a mailing address from you and send you out a door prize. So again, thank you. I hope all you have to do tonight is just move into your kitchen or lounge room for dinner, because it's pretty wild out there at the moment. So thank God we don't all have to get back in our cars and leave a venue. So that's one of the great advantages of having these webinars. And yeah, thank you all again for your time. And even though we didn't get to meet face to face, it's been a really valuable afternoon. Thank you so much. Thank you.